Welcome to another edition of 100% Canucks. John Shannon and Landan Ferraro. Ron Delorme is our guest today. Landon, on the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, as an Indigenous leader in this country, Ron Delorme has done a great many things for his people. And he's done it with a Canuck logo on his sweater as a player and for almost 40 years as a scout. And he's one of the great characters of our game. I don't know how well you know Ronnie, but everywhere you see him, there's always a handshake and a smile. And when you talk to the scouts, and certainly in talking to Ron Delorme, you understand how those gentlemen love the game of hockey. Yeah, and I mean, I knew the name for sure, especially being around Vancouver and how much that name means here. But to see on the inside, my first year being done playing, I was an assistant coach in the BCHL, and he'd come watch some of those games. Not once did I ever hear people around saying like, oh, this scout's here tonight or this scout's here. But when Ron was there, it was a big deal, and everyone wanted a chance to be able to go say hi and get one of those handshakes that, man, like, he might be 70, but like that is a grip still. And he's a big man. He is a big man. Yeah. And you wonder, the intimidating factor of Ron Delorme on skates scared a lot of people in the National Hockey League.
I don't have a hard time believing that. Oh, man.
I'm not a huge advocate of fighting, but go on YouTube and try to find the Ron Delorme Jamie McCowan fight. To me, it is a classic, an absolute classic.
It looks like a video game that you play now because there's no defense when you're playing video game fighting. It's just punch, punch, punch. And in the power in both sides of those punches, I watched it 3 or 4 times today again. It's incredible. Like, you don't see much like that anymore.
Well,
probably for the best.
I was actually there live and watched it live. Oh, yeah, I was. And knowing both guys, you went, oh my good, how are they going to survive this? Mm-hmm. And that was at a point in our lives where Harry Neal had the famous line, because people were starting to criticize fighting. The line was, you know what, if we have all these fights, we might just have to build bigger arenas. But
it's funny you say that, because my question was going to be, what was the sound like in that place when that got going?
It was electric. Yeah. It was electric. I mean, we have come a long way in the game. Fighting is not near a percentage of the play that it was in the 70s or 80s. I think that's a good thing. I really do. Yeah. Because last I checked, when you read the rule book, the word fighting is still a penalty. And the idea is not to take penalties. So anyway, but there were some Saturday nights that were made for fighting, and Ron Delorme was a big part of it. The other thing is, today is the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. Ron is in Regina for a special event being held by the Western Canada Professional Hockey Scouts Association, a foundation to raise money for the Indigenous, and they are paying tribute to Brian Trottier tonight at an event there. It's going to be a spectacular time with some great storytelling. Our old pal Dennis Bayek is the master of ceremonies. And Ron Delorme is a big part of that. And Ron Delorme has given a lot back to his community, and we'll talk to him about that. With Landan Ferraro, I'm John Shannon. Ron Delorme next on 100% Canucks.
I won't keep you long. Darren Millard with a tip for everyone who loves great hockey podcasts like this one. John Shannon and I host the OG of 100% Hockey, coming your way multiple times a week. The guest list is the best you will find. Multiple shows a week ensures you won't miss out on any news, and we dig even deeper into the biggest stories around the NHL. Most of our guests are also friends, so I promise there'll be more conversation beyond the X's and the O's. John really does get bored with that after a while. So join us for 100% Hockey. The name says it all. Subscribe now while you enjoy thinking about it, and enjoy.
Welcome back to 100% Canucks. Landon and John, joined by the great Ron Delorme, the Chief. And here we are on Tuesday, the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. Ron, you're in Regina as we speak for a great cause that the Western Canada Professional Scouts are putting on, honoring Indigenous hockey players. Just tell me quickly what the day means to you.
We're hosting this banquet, obviously, for that we've got the legends of Aboriginal people, but my mother was a survivor, and when I think about it, when I think about what she went through, this day means so much to me. Every year on this day, it ensures that survivors' voices are heard and remembered, and that's my mother. And just a little story about my mother, why this day means so much to me. 10 years ago, she tried to commit suicide in front of me, and because of her experiences in residential school. So this is a big day for me. I try to reflect what that day means, and that's to create awareness of every child matters.
How do you think we didn't give this day enough purpose for years and years and years? Because let's face it, the Aboriginal world lived with residential schools and the issues of residential schools for decades.
John, a lot of people didn't know about it. I have to admit, when I was growing up, I didn't know a lot about this residential school situation myself. But now, when I reflect back to why my mother, when I grew up going to school, she wouldn't let us do any field trips. She wouldn't let us do anything that had required a holiday or going with the school activities. And she'd always keep us at home. And then my sister and I were always mad because everybody else went on a field trip except her and I. But now I understand why she didn't want us to be going anywhere because of some of the things that happened to her. So, just from her experiences, she just kept us out of, she just kept us under a mushroom is what she did because of not being able to do anything when I was growing up. So as I was growing up, I started learning more about, my mother went to this school, and it's just sad, because a lot of people didn't understand what was going on in those years. Because I always say this, and I could put it to both of you guys, how would you feel if you had 3 young kids, they were forced to be taken away from you? Then and a lot of people, how they respond, they would respond in violence, but, there was no violence when they took the kids away because they were all too scared to do anything. But that's why, it was learning. As I didn't learn that till I even got into the pro ranks. And I realized, hey, my mother was a big part of this, because my mother went to school with Fred Saskmoose in St. Michael's School between Prince Albert and Saskatoon Duck Lake. And the stories I've heard, you could tell, if you read that book by Fred Saskmoose, know some of the things, the atrocities that happened.
How can we do more? Can we do more to help the situation?
Yes. To do more is people have to listen and understand, and remember what they went through. I think it's just to learn and listen, and because that's what they've done is every year they gather what's left of the survivors. They bring them to Ottawa, bring them to Vancouver. I've been twice to Vancouver, where people like my mother can go and tell their stories. It could be privately, or it could be open to the public. But they're continuing to do this because, like my mother, she passed away a year ago on the 23rd last year. And you know what? It broke my heart that she never got healed, never got fixed, to really tell her story, what happened to her. When she tried to commit suicide, I took her to, when my sister and I took her to get help, and she got help, but they were going to send her to Nanaimo, and she lives in Saskatchewan. That's like reliving to go be by herself in Nanaimo.
Right.
And so we found a place here in Saskatchewan, and when she passed away, I looked at her, go, it broke my heart to see that she never got healed.
Before we talk about you as a hockey player, tell us what what your scouts group is doing in Regina tonight.
Well, you know what? Tonight we were supposed to get together, but again, I got here late, so I'm sure they're all kind of meeting up here. And right now, I'm getting all these calls. We're going to have 10 Chiefs that are coming here. Treaty 6. There's going to be Treaty 6 and Treaty 4 Chiefs that are going to be on stage with Brian to blanket him. We're going to blanket because Brian is our most decorated.
Brian Trotch.
He's our most decorated Aboriginal player, Métis player that we have. He's our Wayne Gretzky of Aboriginal people. And man, for what he's won, for all the awards that he's won, like 7 Stanley Cups. He's our most decorated guy. So I think it's really it's going to be a big thing for us to be able to celebrate with him, to see him get this blanket, by all these Chiefs.
Well, it will be special. All right. Not many times in 2025 do we get to talk about a guy who was drafted in the mid-70s in the WHA and the NHL. You were drafted by the Kansas City Scouts and by the Denver Spurs, according to some of the records that I've checked out. And you elected to go to the WHA, not the NHL.
Yeah, what happened there was when I got drafted in the 4th round by Kansas City, and I got drafted by the World Hockey called at that time was a secret draft. So why I went to the World Hockey is because I was guaranteed that I got offered a contract, and then and that signing bonus. So I elected to go that route. But after that first year, when I got sent to Tucson, Arizona, we were sharing with Phoenix Roadrunners. And I finally got called up from there, and we played that. Maybe we might have played 20 games, and then we were starting to have financial trouble. And then, so we moved to Ottawa and didn't last very long there. And then, And then I didn't really know what to do. Phoenix were going to pick up my contract, which was 3 years, 2 more actually. So I thought I wanted to go there. And this is where I look at Boom Boom Geoffrion was so instrumental in the decision that I made. Boom Boom Geoffrion was representing Shadiac, an agent from Montreal at the time. And Boom Boom Geoffrion says, why don't we go to the NHL, give it a try? I said, well, Boom, I says, I got a guarantee if I go to Phoenix, I got 2 years. He says, no, let's go to the NHL. He was starting to see a little bit of problems in World Hockey. So I elected to go to the NHL with no contract. And you know what? John Wilson was the coach in Colorado. Then he liked me. He liked the way I played, but they didn't have enough contract to sign me. But I ended up signing a contract right after Christmas. They signed me, and then that was 1976. I played 29 games there, and I never looked back from that time. Again, Boomer Geoffrion helped me make that decision to go NHL over World Hockey after that.
So 1976, next year's 2026. That's 50 years in the NHL, Ronnie. 50 years.
It's 49 now as a player and scout, and I really want to do 50 and have that under my belt. It's just, it'll be a proud moment for me because, not too many people can say Aboriginal people have done this, stayed this long in this game, let alone, Ron Delorme.
Yeah. Hey, how'd you get to Vancouver?
I was in Colorado, and Billy McMillan was coach and general manager, and we were kind of not seeing eye to eye, and so things were not kind of working out for me. So what happened was he says, you know what, I'm going to put you on waivers. And so I said, okay, great. I thought this would give me an opportunity to go not just one place, but, he was good enough to put me on waivers rather than trade me. That's, that I have to credit for that. But so I got a call from Philadelphia. They kind of talked to me. They said they were interested in me, want to know a little bit about me. Then I got a call from Boston, also very interested in me in the way I played. I played their style of game, when I was being called by them. Little did I know that Vancouver would be drafting me second overall in the waiver draft. That's again, I can say, hey, I got drafted second overall, but it was in the waiver draft. And you know what? Joining that team, it was like a lunch bucket team. They were just a team that, that had a little bit of everything. And you know what? That year we went to the Stanley Cup final and against the Islanders. But Islanders were just they were just a true team that dynasty. Then they beat us 4 straight. But that's how I joined that team. I made a lot of friends still living there. And I played their style of game. I didn't realize that Vancouver were like that too, lunch bucket team.
And so, like, to be, put on waivers, you end up in Vancouver and you go to a cup final that first year. Like what are your memories of that team, and what made that group so special to be able to get to that point?
First of all, there was a little bit of everything. We had Thomas Brodin was our most talented player, most skilled player. We had a lot of Swedes that had talent too, but Thomas was our main man. Then we had Stan, who was just your special type of player, Stan Smeel, Kurt Fraser, and we had big Harold Snaps. We had a little bit of everything. But my most memorable time of that run to the Stanley Cup final was we were playing Chicago. We beat Chicago, I believe, in 6. But I remember in Chicago, we had this, I think we had a line brawl, but I remember I got hurt. I got hurt in Chicago. And I was kind of at that time, kind of a big part of that team, playing the 4th line, sometimes 3rd line. But I remember I got hurt. I kind of jammed my foot against the boards, and then same time Thomas Brodin got hurt. So now we're both in the training room, kind of laying down, and the trainers are looking at us and talking to us. And then I remember Roger Nielsen. Roger Nielsen came over to me. And not Thomas. I'll always remember. Came over to me. He says, "How are you doing?" I says, "I don't think I can go. I don't think I can go." I says, "It's pretty bad." So you know what he said to me? He says, "Listen, you gotta get to the bench. We got to make that other team believe that you're okay." And you know what? I says, "Roger, I'm going to fly out of here like a butterfly to the bench." It was unbelievable how he made me feel so big and so, just like I was so important. And that's how Roger was. He knew the value that I gave to that team as much as Thomas Brodin. He didn't even go see how Thomas was.
And I'm sure many of those nights, all you scouts are together, you tell Thomas that every once in a while too, right?
Oh, yeah, we do. The sad part about Thomas, I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but Thomas played a real tough game. He was, there was always questions if the Swedes go in the corner as well. He did go in the corner, and you know what? Today he's suffering from dementia, or if not Alzheimer's, from the time he played the game like we did, and he's suffering now. And it's a kind of a sad situation because I love the guy as a brother. I played with him in 1981. I worked with him until 2 years ago. And you know what? I remember talking to our management, and I teared up. I says, I didn't try to hide he had this dementia. I didn't try to hide it. He says, I didn't want to say anything. I didn't try to hide it. But eventually, you could tell it was getting worse. It was getting worse. So they made him an ambassador. And then it's just sad because apparently last week Thomas was in Paul River went to a cabin with Mike Penny, his wife, and and Kathy and Thomas went, and Dorothy. They were out in by the ocean there in the bushy area. He got lost for 2 hours. Lucky a dog found him. That's sad. Sad.
And of course, that's when I met you the first time, was in the early 80s when I was around the team doing television, and nobody gave Thomas Brodin for the type of hockey player he was. He was playing in Vancouver, where not many people watched the games outside of Vancouver, and B, everybody thought, well, he's just a typical Swede, and he was far from that, and was a prolific player for the Canucks for so long.
Finesse. When you call finesse, that's what you call finesse. He was such a graceful skater and good hands. And you know what? The guy scored 30 goals. Everybody thought he wasn't a good goal scorer, but he was still in the 30-goal range.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, so your world as a scout, how did that start? And do any of us outside of the scouting world have an idea of what that job is really like?
Well, you know what? This goes back to year. I tore my knee in 1985 and wasn't able to come back. I tried, and so I had one more year in my contract. And what happened was I was going to go see my folks in Saskatoon. So I was flying there, and the Vancouver management approached me and they said, "Listen, can you watch some games for us in Saskatoon?" There's 2 games, because they had just fired their scout, Western scout by the name of George Wood. So they had nobody. I said, well, I thought, well, you know what? Why not? So I went there, and I liked it, because the coaches, general manager, were some guys that I played against in the National Hockey or junior, so I knew them. So my adjustment to scouting was pretty easy. But I also was offered a job by Brian Burke and Pat Quinn. At the time, we were sharing a farm team in Quebec. We were sharing in Fredericton. We shared
Fredericton, sure.
Quebec and Vancouver shared a team in Fredericton, and Ron Lapointe was the coach. And they asked me if I wanted to go be an assistant coach with them. And I really thought about it, because what was happening was I used to run practices for Roger Nielsen. I used to run practices for Bob McCammon. So I had that experience, and I was doing Eye in the Sky when I was hurt, and I was doing Eye in the Sky when I did Healthy Scratch. So I thought I really was going to go that direction. But then I went into the scouting, because I thought, oh man, there was so many people I knew in that business. Well, a couple of years after, or even a year after, Mark Crawford took my position, and look what he ended up ending up coaching National Hockey for many years and winning a Stanley Cup. But that's how I got my scouting started, was in 1986. Vancouver were needing a Western scout, and I remember it was the Griffiths family themselves came to me. They were the owners. They said, "We got a spot open for you, and it's scouting." He said, "Do you want it?" And I'm telling you, this is the Griffiths family, for the owners to come and ask me that, before it even came to the general manager to ask me.
Go for it.
No, go ahead, Landon.
Oh, I was just to say, like, when you first started then, like, what was the hardest part going from player quickly into scouting? Like, did you have some good mentors, or did you just kind of get chucked out there and figure it out?
Well, hockey's played a major part in my life, and I've been blessed with in the mentor department, and I could say my mentors at the time was that Don Cherry, Roger Nielsen, Pat Quinn, and their guidance, and their advice to me, they said, always remember this: the secret for success in life is to find great teachers and to follow their advice. Well, you know what? I think I've done that. I followed their advice. Because I look at, Don Cherry. I love Don Cherry. He loved me as a player, but I know in my heart he made me the better player, the better person. And you know what? He made also to follow his advice. He loved me as a player, because I played his game. I played his game, and it made me a person to believe in myself, so I credit so much. Anyways, we all know Pat Quinn was, it was like, he was like a father to me, like when I lost mine. So I love that man. And Roger Nielsen was an innovator of the game. Like he was unbelievable. He was always challenging National Hockey League rules. He was so good at it. But what an innovator of the game, man. He started this, Captain Video. He started all the video stuff. He started assistant coaches stuff. And like I say, he was an innovator of the game. And those are three of my mentors. And the other mentor, and I will say this, and I will mention it tomorrow, is Tiger Williams. Tiger Williams. When I went to play in Surf Current, I ended up playing with Trey Ruskowski and Tiger Williams on the line. And playing on that line, you have to learn how to fight and play tough, And there was line brawls going on. And well, I was part of the line brawls. Well, I had to learn all this stuff, and then I started playing that way. Now it's more like steady. I was doing this more and more, but then what I was doing more and more was taking bad penalties, like costly penalties, because what I was doing was now the fans were just they were just doing cat calls. Players on the ice were just racial calling me names, just saying all these cat calls and saying stuff to me on the ice. And, it made me an aggressive player, an aggressive person. I started taking bad penalties, going after these guys and costing the team penalties. And of all people to tell me was, Dave Tiger Williams, the guy that's famous for taking probably, costly penalties. But he sat me down. He sat me down after practice. We were just sitting on the bench. And I remember to this day, it made a lot of sense. He says, listen, he says, you can't change who you are. You are who you are. He says, you're native. He says, you know what? You know how you want to hurt those people or those players on the ice? He says, he pointed at the scoreboard. He says, get goals, get an assist. You know what? It made a lot of sense. And so, I changed my attitude. I still find, like I was fighting for my heritage a lot during those days. And I will say this, even in the National Hockey League, when I first started, those things were happening. And you know what? I silently hurt. People don't understand how, like, it's a difficult situation when you're the only Aboriginal from every level. You're the only guy. Then all of a sudden you're getting into the junior and the pro ranks where all the people are asking me anything that was controversial with Native people, anything controversial, anything to politics, everything. They thought I had to have the answer for that. Well, I was just a hockey player like them. I didn't have the answers. A lot of times that bothered me. That's why I say I silently hurt, and nobody knows. I can't, and I never told that to anybody. Nobody knows a lot of that story, but I will say when I retire, I am going to travel and tell the story.
So, do you think are we better now in 2025? Are we more? Are the majority of us more accepting? Are Native people getting an opportunity to play the game?
Yes, they definitely are. I think now, when I look at the National Hockey League, they're the National Hockey today are into they're into diversity. So they're protecting name calling. They're doing all this. We're getting better. I would say we've come a long ways. We've come a long ways. The NHL have come a long ways to protect all this stuff that we're going on. That we're going on in terms of name calling. Now our game has gone around the world now. Everybody sees our game from all race. So it's really happened. We've opened doors. The guy that really opened our door for us was Fred Sasakamoose. He was our hero. Every other race have their heroes. You've got Michael Jordan. In basketball, he's a hero. And you got Maradona, soccer. He's a hero. And then you had Gordy Howe and Gretzky. He's a hero. Well, we had two heroes. We had Fred Sasakamoose and we had Jim Nielsen. These guys paved the way for so many of us, including me, to go and make it in the National Hockey League.
So when was the first time you met Sasakamoose?
Way back when he came back. He was playing actually in North Balford, and because of my mother, they went to school together. He had seen me with my mom and dad, and he called me down and he gave me a hockey stick. And I'll always remember that time. What he's done
And Jimmy
for me.
Nielsen?
Jim Nielsen, that guy played. Over 1,000 game. I was at his 1,000 game when Cleveland were an NHL team. Then they were giving him a silver stick because of his 1,000 game, and he was runner up to Bobby Orr, and he was, I think, into 4 All-Star games, and and that guy, sometimes like people forget about him. They kind of forget about him.
Well, he played on a great Ranger team that the biggest problem the Rangers had was the Boston Bruins were always better, and the Montreal Canadiens were always better. But he was in that group of guys with the Rangers when Brad Park and Jimmy Nielsen and Rod Sealing were there. They were a great group of hockey players, but never got the credit because there was always one team better than them in the standings. It was fascinating. I mean, they only went to one Stanley Cup final in 1972.
I think he was invited for the 1972 Canadian team. He was invited to that, never made it, but he was, again, I'm proud of Fred and what he's taught us native players to give back. And that's the life skills that we've learned, through sports, not just hockey. There's so many more native kids playing today, so much more today. And I look at Freddie, he was a finesse player. And there was a time, and I would say the mid 70s to the 80s, the only native players that were playing were tough players, like kind of Goonish type style. I'm not kidding you. And when I started scouting, I kind of blame myself kind of the problem too, because that's what I was looking for too as a scout, and then every Aboriginal player that was playing had to be tough. And so many guys that played were tough, were literally tough. And that's what they were kind of, and at that time, not just, the management of all levels, like especially, in junior, they wanted tough Aboriginal players. They were kind of focusing on those guys and, is he tough? Is he tough? Well, why don't you ask me about the other guy if he's tough? You know what I mean? So the native guy had to prove himself like everybody else, but the native guy were kind of looked at as that goon style type of player.
When you're scouting, like I've always been curious, when you're watching a kid, you can see the goals, the points, their skating. Like, what's something that you look at, especially as you've gone through all these years, that you can see that, this kid might have it that can transfer to the NHL? Like, other than the obvious, like, what are you looking at?
Well, everybody has a niche in terms of what, every kind of scout has something they like. And, well, for me, the number one thing I always like is character and skill. At one time, it was like character, skill, and big, Then it changed where character, skill, it doesn't matter, So, but it was always character that I would fight for, and the skill. And you know what? And they have to skate, they have to skate. But that skill is that's the most improved skill you can improve on is skating. The other ones, hockey sense. Sometimes some guys are not, they're not high in hockey sense, but they can play within the system within that sense, So you always got to look at, what that kid brings, and it's, you got to at least see the kid 4 or 5 times. You can't just go, and that's where I look at. Sometimes it's unfair to the North American kid. When we would go to Europe, we'd see that guy 12 times, maybe more, because of tournaments. So, and then sometimes our North American guy we'd see only 3 or 4 times, and maybe less, And so, but tournament hockey that's been going on for all these years kind of favors to seeing those guys more because of tournament, because there's so many teams there. But again, for me, my issue was always kind of character, skill, and I changed my, because in those days, Pat Quinn wanted 6 foot plus 200-pound guys.
Pat Quinn wanted Pat Quinn.
That's right. He was, what a great man he was. That guy would sooner sit there with you or me or or sit with people that he really enjoyed. He was always bumping elbows with, really profile people, but he'd rather sit with people that you can just have a discussion, talk, and laugh. He was a great man.
Tell you what, Ronnie, I don't think I have met anybody in the game that had more respect from people, more friendship from people than Pat Quinn.
Oh,
truly.
Oh, yes.
There was only one. There was only one Pat Quinn.
Yes, very, very true. Because if you look at how all you have to do is ask the guys that work for him, or people outside the game that just showed how much respect he had for people. But you know what? He earned his respect because you know what? He'd have time for you. But he was a smart man. That guy could speak without paper. Like some guys. At one time I was great, John. One time I was great with names. Like I could just bang, 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 bang. I know it has to do with age. I'm 70 now, but you know what? I worry about the fact that I got hit a lot. Like everybody said, oh, what a great fight! What a great fight! He said, look, there's no marks on your face. And we'd go out for dinners with our wives and some of the players, and they said, "Oh, wow, look there's no mark on your face." But you notice I'm not eating. I can't eat because the cuts are inside my mouth. So
I couldn't believe it watching some of those today on YouTube. Like there wasn't much defense in your fighting technique. You'd stand in there toe to toe. It was unbelievable watching those again.
Well, I worry about it today. I honestly worry about the fact that because I did that, I worry about how now at one time I can just remember names. One time now I can speak. I can go and speak, but I need the paper in front of me now, and that I'm hoping that's age, but I hope that's what it is. But I get worried. Harold Snips and I sit down and talk once in a while about that, saying, you know what, we worry about those things because you know what, it doesn't take much. Head trauma, it doesn't. Soccer players they're finding so much of soccer with that CTE because of their, with their head hitting the soccer ball. So,
Well, I'll tell you what, Ronnie, it's great to share some time on a really important day, a National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. Thank you for everything you've done for the game, for your people, and for the Vancouver Canucks. It's great talking to you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Landon. Appreciate the time.
That's Ron Delorme. Landon and I'll be back after this on 100% Canucks. Beautiful. Thank you, Ronnie.
All right.
Thank you so much.
I won't get you in trouble that way. We didn't get you in trouble.
Because we're usually have to get a permission. Like they have to call them before we talk about Canucks.
Yeah, no, I bet they knew what I was doing today with this one.
Yeah,
so, by the way, we had Jimmy on one of our other shows today.
Yes.
He just fucking opens a can of worms all the time. So now everybody in Vancouver thinks Braden Coots is staying for at least 10 games. So,
yes. You know what? Here's a good example about. That kid he's going to be a captain someday. He's so full of character and so much determination in the game. And yet he's got skill and ability,
Yeah.
And maybe sometimes
he looks frail. He looks frail to me.
He's a kid, he's 18 years old and he's maybe, have a look at him for 2 or 3 games and send him back. But I think another year would certainly do him good, maybe even 2. But you know what? He's making waves up there.
It sure is. Well, listen, go down. The boys are waiting for you in the bar.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Guys, thank you again.
So, Landon, not that we dug deep into the life of a scout, but could you ever imagine being a scout?
I've definitely thought about it at points, but at the same time, like the passion and dedication that you have to be not only just a good scout, but make it as long as he has and done what he has. Like the hours that they put in are so unrecognized by 95% of hockey, right? Like you just hear, yeah, like the scouts are working. Like especially for the amateurs, they're not going into major cities all the time. They're driving between rinks in the Western League and different junior leagues. Like the amount of time and effort they put in, it's pretty incredible to be honest, what they give up to do the job that they do.
It's not that glamorous at the Fairfield Inn, you know.
No, it's not. But at the same time, you talk to guys that have been in that for a long time, and the stories and friendships that they've made, because they spend more time traveling with other scouts than they see their own families a lot of time. And, like they're really proud, as they should be, of the work that they've brought to the organizations that they're working with.
And it's funny because, I mean, in television, we are all guilty. When we talk about players, then we talk about coaches, and we talk about managers. But in the end, it's the scouts who are the lifeblood of a team and trying to find new talent, younger talent, pleading for their guys at the draft table, pleading for patience with an organization not to trade them the picks. And they just don't get any credit for what they do in the game of hockey, do they? No,
I mean, you basically just said it, but like they are the lifeblood of the game. Like the GMs and other people upper management, like they don't have the time to get around and go see everybody. They'll be able to go see some of the, once the scouts compile their list of, hey, these are the people that are probably available in our range and things like that, they'll go and check them out as much as they can. But you have to be able to trust your scouting staff, because like you said, when it's on draft day and they're 2 picks away from making their pick, they need to have a voice. They're the ones that have seen it all. And if you don't trust them and you start to think, I know this better than this scout, you're going to make some mistakes that aren't just going to hurt you, for the next couple of years. It can really put a big strangle onto your organization for 10, 15 years. Like you hit one of those picks that a scout's really gone to bat for, especially in a later, mid to late round. They're like, I know there's something in this kid. And if they can trust them and it hits, like that's a player on your roster that is an absolute bonus, right? Like you expect the first couple to be there, first couple rounds, but it's those middle to late. If you can start finding some of those guys, a great example on present day Vancouver that's making or trying to make a push is Kirill Kudryavtsev. He was a 7th rounder. He's an NHL player. He just got sent down a couple days ago, I believe now. But like he's a legit NHL player. That's work off of a scout that finds that player and says, we need to take him. So were you, when you were in the dressing room in Red Deer and the scuttlebutt and guys are talking and teasing each other in the room, would there be discussions of, hey, I hear so-and-so's coming to watch the game tonight? Was there always, was there awareness and acknowledgement of scouts coming to games in the Western League? You'd hear about it a little bit. You'd also see, if you knew where it was, you'd see the list. If you knew where to check it out, then you knew exactly who was in the building. But for us, our team was, again, we've gone over this, our team was not very good. No. So it was more about, okay, who's coming to play? Calgary's coming in tonight. There's going to be a lot of scouts here because they're going to want to see them and them. Well, this is our chance. By the way, if you go to a junior game or a BC League game and you look in the corner and there's 25 guys wearing black jackets, those are the scouts, because it's the official uniform of the hockey scout. The black jacket. It's cold in those rinks. You need that big overcoat. I just think there's a secret code that says if you're going to be a scout, you have to wear a black jacket. I think it's just part of the uniform. I think it's the easiest way, just like a lot of junior players are in those pea coats all the time, because you can wear whatever underneath it. You zip that thing up and you still look pretty professional. Sounds good. Anyway, thanks to Ron Delorme for joining us.
from Regina. Thank you for this, Landan, and we will talk to you later in the week.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks again to Ron. That was amazing.
So the Canucks are inching closer to the start of the regular season. We'll talk a little more in detail later in the week. Thanks for listening or watching 100% Canucks.